Today we have independent football writer and expert in all things South American soccer. We know him as Butch, and but we'd like to welcome Martin Wright to the OLS vidcast. How are things in South America, Butch?
Other than the weather, doing great.
What's wrong with the weather?
A bit hot today. Well, it's a bit hot every day. We're practically on the equator here, so.
Well, it's a bit hot and steamy where I'm at too, so I can empathize, and Brett can too. We're in the 90s today, and it's the humidity is off the charts. But I want to start. I mean, hey, this is all about what happened in the World Cup today and all the days before it, as far as South America goes. It seems like a lot of people, analysts, writers, posters, pundits, they're all asking what happened to South America. But maybe let's take it one at a time, Butch. Let's start with Brazil today, and get your thoughts about what did the Dutch expose as far as Brazil goes, and maybe some specifics on why you thought Brazil kind of fell apart there at the end.
The first problem that Brazil had at this World Cup was a problem I think all the South American sides had, and that is a lack of composure when faced with adversity. Neither Brazil nor Argentina or the Chileans or even the Paraguayans really had any experience of what to do if you had to come back.
Yeah.
After you were coming back from a 2-1 or 1-0 deficit, they really didn't have an answer. They started to lose control. The Brazilians especially, you look at Felipe Melo, who is already considered somewhat of a hothead anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They did it. Brazil at this World Cup had a 20-minute bad spell, and that 20-minute bad spell was enough to sink them. You saw the Brazilians, when they gave up the second goal, they just completely fell apart.
Yep.
In a similar token, specifically to Brazil, Dunga, who is a lip-breed defending a lead. And the problem with that is that he did not have much in the way of offensive options.
Right.
And when you see how Brazil's project has been going for the last 4 years, the last 3.5 years, Dunga has been betting everything on Kaká's good health.
Right.
And up through the Confederations Cup last year, you saw that Kaká was on fire. He was the general. He armed the attack. No better example of that was the final against the United States. They were down 2-0. Mm-hmm. Kaká basically administered the comeback by moving a little bit further outside, found the holes, got the ball into Luis Fabiano and the other attackers there, and they picked the Americans apart. Went to Real Madrid and went to an entirely different system. He began picking up injuries. He had difficulty staying in form, and Dunga did not have anyone that would be able to fit into that situation if it wasn't producing.
Right.
And that really sunk their boat because he did not have an answer.
Right. It didn't look like they had an answer, especially when they went down. And you mentioned the discipline. That was really disappointing. I wonder, what the reception was there in Brazil as far as Felipe Melo's meltdown.
I was actually kind of embarrassed by the way the Brazilians have handled their national team's return. If you look at the way the Chileans and the Paraguayans and the Argentines, especially the Argentines, have handled their national team, when Maradona's team lost 4-0 and came home, they were greeted by 10,000 fans cheering them on, celebrating with flags and fireworks and confetti and lining the highway to welcome the team home, saying that they brought back the joy of being Argentine, the joy of playing football. I don't know how much of that had to do with Maradona's magnetic personality or how much is the Argentine spirit for their national team.
Yeah.
The Brazilian national team, by contrast, got to the airport. There were fans swearing at the players, throwing coins at the players. Some fans tried to throw oranges at Dunga, orange being the symbol, of course, for the Netherlands.
Right.
And they had to have a police escort help Felipe Melo get to his vehicle from the tarmac.
Yeah.
In order to go. And Julio Cesar, the goalkeeper, was filmed just absolutely bawling his eyes out with his mom in the car, and the fans just they've turned on this team. And I think it actually even started before the World Cup. There was an unspoken war between the press and the national team.
Yeah.
And that really created a bad atmosphere for the team. I mean, they never actually felt like the public was behind them. And though Brazilians always put on their jerseys, get out their flags, and take the day off from work to watch the national team play, in many regards, this team never really was accepted by the Brazilian public.
Well, you know, it didn't help probably. I mean, Dunga is not the best when it comes to dealing with the press. He often left that to an assistant, probably for a good reason. But speaking of defensive lapses and weaknesses, let's move on to Argentina before we run out of time. One of the things that I've been bellowing about is the Argentine defense, that they could be exposed, that the weaknesses would be exposed, and Germany did that in many ways. And I guess not only speaking to the defense, which I'm sure you'll get to, but also the coveted Argentine offense looked, where was it?
As far as the defense goes, when I did my guide or my predictions for the South Americans before the World Cup, and I wrote a little bit about the Argentines in that piece, I mentioned the fact that their Achilles heel would be their back four.
Yep.
They had two center backs trying to play wing backs. They were slow. They were old. Their defensive midfielder, Verón, when he was healthy, he's old. He's 35 years old, and trying to keep pace with someone like Germany, which has the youngest national team average since 1934 at this World Cup.
Right.
They exposed the holes at the back. Maradona is the absolute opposite of what Dunga is. I mentioned Dunga being a guy who lives and breathes defense. Maradona only knows full speed ahead, play chicken with the adversary, and try to score 4 goals because we may give up 3.
Right.
Well, when Germany got a goal on 3 minutes, that Argentina, as I mentioned with the other South American side, lacked the composure to come back. They started playing like a pickup game, just trying to throw everything they could in the attack. They lost their cool. They weren't patient with the ball. They just tried surging ahead, and every time they surged ahead, the Germans would just counterattack on them and pick them apart.
Right. The one thing that I noticed was that certain players were trying to do too much. At some points when like Messi would get the ball, he would have 4 Germans immediately surround him, and it just seemed like he really took him out of the game for the most part, outside of some plays.
Well, that's definitely an example of their losing their composure. When you lose your composure, you try to do everything by yourself and not rely on the weapons and on the training that you've had. And Messi did that. You saw Messi tried to dribble through 4. On a good day, he'll dribble through 3, but the 4th will get him. And they did not play the ball wide. They did not play the ball patiently. They did not try crossing to the second post. They really didn't do anything right after conceding the early goal, and it was historic.
Yeah.